God, we breathe deeply. We bring before you our stresses, our burdens, our worries, our anxieties. And we ask you in this sacred space to meet us and speak to us what we each need to hear. God, I pray for those weighed down with anxieties about the future. God, I bring before you my brothers and sisters who have great tension because of conflict in a relationship. We bring before you our anger and our desire for revenge in the people that we're having a hard time forgiving. And in this space, in this place, we ask you to speak into that, to set us free, to remind us, to ground us, to center us. And then as we observe this Eucharist, this good gift, as we take this bread and dip it in this cup, please remind us that whatever it is, we're going to be okay. We ask you to give us a freedom, a lightness, a liberation that comes from understanding who you are and who we are. So, as we look at this story with its twists and the sort of surprise to it, as it unsettles us, we ask that in that disruption, there would be all sorts of new things to see. And in the strong name of the resurrected Jesus, everybody said, Amen. 2 Samuel 13. 2 Samuel 23, verse 13, even better. During harvest time, 3 of the 30 chief warriors came down to David at the cave of Adullam. 2 Samuel 23 is essentially a flashback to much earlier. It's at the end of David's life. The writer is telling you about some moments that had happened earlier in David's life. King David. 3 of the 30 chief warriors came down to David at the cave of Adullam while a band of Philistines was encamped in the valley of Rephaim. At that time, David was in the stronghold and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. Now, first off, an earlier flashback to this flashback shows you who was in the cave with him. David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him. That sounds like a fun bunch. Everybody with issues shows up in the cave. And he became their commander. About 400 men were with him. So in the cave of Adullam, David is surrounded by lots of people with lots of pent-up issues, anxiety, anger, and, to make it even more fun, his relatives show up. So that's the picture we are given here. Now, number 2, an earlier passage, Saul, the king, the most powerful man in the land, told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David. So when David is in the cave, he is not yet king. The passage in 2 Samuel is essentially at the end of the king's life, looking back over his life. Oh yeah, there was this one time when he was in the cave of Adullam, long before he was king. He had around him everybody who's discontent, distressed, everybody with problems. 400 of them show up to join him in the cave along with his relatives. Oh, and the most powerful man in the land, the king, was trying to kill him. So he's on the run. That's why he's out in the wilderness living in a cave like an animal, because he's being hunted. Now, it also says, verse 14, that David was in the stronghold and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. David grew up in Bethlehem. So not only is he being hunted, Not only does the most powerful man in the land want him dead, not only is he surrounded by everybody with issues, but we find out that his hometown has been conquered by the enemy. Now let me show you a picture of the cave of Adullam. That's a good time. So here he is in the cave, surrounded, hunted, fearing for his life, with all of it, and they make him their commander. So it's not just dudes in a cave, it's dudes in a cave, dudes in a cave, dudes in a cave, saying, I don't know what that's about, dudes in a cave saying, lead us, show us the way, fix our problems, make some sort of straight way out of all of this confusion. So it's not just he's there, but he's being expected to command and to lead and make some sense out of all of this. At that time, David was in the stronghold, and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. David longed for water and said, "Oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem." Now, the Philistines have conquered Bethlehem. The enemy is surrounding his hometown, and David says, "Oh, I would give anything for some water from Bethlehem." So, several years earlier, he was a shepherd. His life was essentially take care of a group of sheep, and he would go, I assume, to the well at Bethlehem to get water for his sheep. That was the extent of his responsibility. A couple of years later, the king wants to kill him, and all of these people are looking to him to somehow bring guidance. When he says, "Oh, I'd go for some water from Bethlehem right about now," is he being literal? Or is this a longing at a far more significant level? Oh, back when I was a kid, the water on a hot day at the well near the gate in Bethlehem, there was nothing like it. Oh, I wish things were more simple. Oh, this so complicated, so confused. I would love to just be a shepherd right about now and not have all of this swirling. How did I get from there to here? Oh, remember when we were first married? Are you with me? Remember our first house and how cheap it was to keep it up? Remember when, like, the office, there were just a couple of us and we all knew each other, and it was like just us against the world, and we were doing it together, and it was just like, remember when we could, like, just go out for the night? We didn't need 9 babysitters and a well-organized military operation involving the wipes are here, the diapers are here, the chicken McNuggets are here. Are you with me now? Remember when it wasn't so complicated? Remember when, like, we didn't have any money, so taxes weren't really an issue? Remember when the government didn't know that? Or whatever. How many know exactly what we're talking about here? Yeah, life has gotten really complicated and really confusing. And there's this thing he's this young man. He's got all these people around him like, tell us what to do, tell us what to do. Oh, I'd give anything to go back to Bethlehem and have it just be so simple, clean, and make sense. I knew what my job was. I knew where things were, where they were supposed to be. I got it. And now, I'd give anything for just some water from the spring at Bethlehem. Verse 16, so the 3 mighty warriors broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. Some people are a bit fuzzy on the difference between literal and figurative language. Correct? Whether or not this is a longing or whether he really meant it, there are a group of his dudes who are like, oh, okay, then I'll get you some water from the well at Bethlehem. And they go. Now, the cave of Adullam to Bethlehem is 12 miles. So they hike 12 miles. They break through the enemy lines, get to the well, get the water, and bring it back at the risk of their lives. They make it back with the water, but David refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out before the Lord. Far be it from me, Lord, to do this, he said. Is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their lives? And David would not drink it. And that's the story. Oh, whoever compiled 2 Samuel, what is it? We're like 2 chapters. We're 1 chapter from the end of the thing. At the end, they were like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw in that whole water thing just to at the end and then be done with the life of... This is one of the flashbacks. Oh, yeah, there was one time these guys hiked 12 miles, broke to the enemy lines, got water, brought it back, and David was like, got the water. They brought it to him, and David was like, I prefer Gatorade. No, the G. I wanted the G. No, David gets the water. I assume they handed it to him and David... Far be it for me to drink that. And then he adds the word Lord. Far be it from me, Lord, to drink that. That's the blood of the men who risked their lives. No way is that my water. I assume if you're one of the 3 at this point, you're like, I don't think I'm going to get that corner office. I was hoping this would up my stock. This. Can you imagine there's 400 people gathered around who are also perhaps thirsty? No way am I drinking that. No way. Far be it from me, Lord. Now, this, pouring it out, is coded language. It's an act. It's a ritual. It has religious significance. This wouldn't have just been, oh, he poured it out. This meant something in the ancient world, and they would have gotten what David meant. And then when he says Lord, whoa. Because David sees things in a completely different sort of way. There was what was called a drink offering in the ancient world. You find references to it all across sort of the religious spectrum. Here's one from the Bible. Jacob set up a pillar at the place where God had talked with him, and he poured out a drink offering on it. Numbers 28, pour out the drink offering to the Lord at the sanctuary. A drink offering was part of the rituals of the religion of Israel, but in the ancient world, whether you followed this one God or whether you had a sense that there were all kinds of gods, there was an awareness that when you are blessed with something, that all that you have is a gift. And in the ancient world, what you did not want to do is offend the gods who have given you this gift. So if you own a vineyard and the vineyard produces grapes and the grapes produces wine, what you do with that first bit of wine is you offer it on an altar to your god or to your gods as a way of saying to the divinities or the divine, I understand that this is a gift, what I have. And I wouldn't want you to ever think that I take whatever I've been given for granted, that I have some sort of entitlement or something. I understand the precious gift that this crop, that this new life, that this wine, that this whatever it is, I understand that this is a gift. And so I'm going to take the first bit of it and I'm going to offer it back as a way of acknowledging, because I would never want to offend you by not being grateful. Some people who look at this and think, oh, how primitive, oh, how kind of old and quaint, also take the first bit of their paycheck and give it away as a way of saying, I acknowledge that this is a gift. And I give back the first bit of it as a way of keeping in mind that it's all a gift. Are you with me? Yeah. So the drink offering in some ways is still alive. We get given that we realize a bit of this I am not going to keep for myself as a way to keep my heart attuned to gratitude. Because I understand that's a muscle that needs to be worked. And that if I don't practice gratitude, specifically in something that costs me, I will develop a sense of entitlement, which will take my heart in all sorts of destructive places. So, when David pours this out, well, a drink offering was a religious act. People who, the mighty 3 and the other 397 would have been like, whoa, look what he's doing. He has turned what these men did by getting the water, he has turned it into an act of worship. That's why he says, far be it from me, Lord. He has turned this into something else. These guys were just doing their job. Commander wants water. We get water. David has taken their duty and their risk and their cost and their sacrifice and turned it from they were just doing their job. He has turned it into something sacred and holy. And he pours it out. Our friend Walter Brueggemann says it like this. David understands intuitively that such a costly commodity is appropriately used only for a sacramental act. David understands that there is something profoundly sacred and holy about what those men did. And so he turns it into a sacramental act. Or perhaps we might say it this way. The sacrifice makes it sacred. You gave of yourself that much? That's a sacred thing. This week, I was walking into a building with one of my kids, and that had like the parking lot, then a whole flight of stairs, then a flat cement kind of area in front of their probably 4 or 6 main doors to the building. And so my son and I had parked a car at one of the lower parking lots, and we're walking up, and I see, by the time we get to the bottom of the stairs, that there's somebody coming out of the building. And it's a woman. She's probably early to mid-30s. And she's standing here. And next to her is a young man. He's probably, I'm going to guess, like 13 or 14. And he has a can of Sprite in his right hand. And he's moving really slowly. And it's more like a shuffle. And he apparently, it appears that he doesn't have very clear eyesight because he's moving very, very slowly, almost with the other hand sort of feeling his way. And he's coming out of the doors, headed for the stairs, and there's a railing going down the right side, his right side of the stairs. And as I'm coming up the stairs, I can hear her, and I realize that she's been talking to him the whole time since they came out of the building. And she's right next to him, and she has this big smile on her face. And she's saying to him, okay, keep going. Okay, the stairs are coming up. Now, there's a railing on the right side, so you're going to need to move your Sprite can from your right hand to your left hand so that with your right hand you can grab the railing. And as I come up the stairs, she sees us and she smiles and she says hello, and I say hello, and she's like radiates this sort of calm. And then as I go in, I hear her, okay, here comes the first step. You're going to be fine. Make sure you keep the Sprite can in your left hand. Now you feel the railing? Good. Now take the first step. And she just keeps talking in this kind, nurturing, graceful, beautiful sort of tone of voice. Is she his mother? Is she his sister? Is she a relative? Is she a caregiver? Is this her job? Is she paid for 40 hours a week of this? What are meals like? Like, what other things? I mean, does she literally, this is the fork. Now you can pick it up. Now take, like, how, to what degree and how many hours a day does she spend? Later, probably 30, 40 minutes later, when we came out of the building, they were now down in the lower parking lot. And I think they were either headed to the car or they had been somewhere else. And I heard, and she was still, okay, now we're going to go here this way. And we're going to go over here. Now make sure you be careful of that. Make sure when you step that you lift your leg up. Whatever was going on there, whatever cost, whatever sacrifice, I guarantee you, if you said to her, this is extraordinary, the presence you are bringing to this young man's life, I guarantee you she would not say, oh, I know, it's so tough. Can you believe the cost and the sacrifice that I put into this kid? No. I guarantee you she would say, of course. What do you mean? That's just what I do. Correct? There's this sort of like ballet to her presence with just beautiful to watch. Is she like that every day, all day? I don't know her, I don't know him, and neither do you, but I tell you that what I saw was sacred in ways that are hard to put into language. Are you with me? That sort of presence, that sort of love. Now, is she doing it because she knows that at some point he'll be able to see well and walk well and he won't need her? Is she doing it because she is guaranteed the results of her labors? No. No. Because he may be like this till the day he dies. Correct? Correct? He may need a full-time caregiver for the next 70 years. She's not doing it because of the results. She's doing it because it's what she's supposed to be doing at this moment, and she's simply there. The sacrifice, which probably isn't even the word she would use. She might use a better word with less letters. Love. The sacrifice makes it sacred. See, David sees the world sacramentally. And so you throw yourself into whatever it is that you are doing, and you give it everything you have, not because of the results or the outcomes, but because it is the right thing to do at that moment. And that sacrifice, that cost, makes whatever it is sacred. So David pours it out. And I swear to you, if you've been with me and seen that woman, you'd have said, whatever that is a sacred thing she is doing with that boy. Now, if you begin to see the world sacramentally, there are all sorts of belief systems we have that quite quickly find themselves in peril. Let's think of some words here. Results, outcomes, guarantees, control, evaluations. For many of us, we do what we do because of the results that we are going to get. And then we evaluate it based on whether or not the results are the results we intended, which works until something doesn't go the way that it was supposed to. And then we're left with this, what do I do with that? Perhaps you were in a relationship and you gave everything you had to this relationship. And then the relationship fell apart. And so you now have within you this thing in the past, and it was costly, and it took a piece out of you. And you carry it around with this sort of, why the waste? I gave 3, 4, 9, 20 years to this person, cause, business, ministry, and then it fell apart. And so we have these areas where we don't know what to do. I don't know how to think about that. It's just sort of there. To think sacramentally is to understand those years, that cost, that sacrifice, you gave yourself to that. And that was a sacred, beautiful thing. David would pour out the water and say, that is an act of worship. God, I brought my whole self to that person. I gave them everything. And so I take those years, I take that effort, I take that money that we invested in that thing that went belly up, and I offer it as a sacred, holy thing. Here, take it. Results, outcomes, guarantees. Parents raise this kid to make certain kinds of choices in the world, to navigate the complexities of our world in a particular way. And then that kid begins to make choices and makes destructive decisions that aren't what the parent programmed them to do. And the parent begins to panic. What about all the Wait. Were you loving that kid because you believed you could control them? Because the control was an illusion. Are you with me? No, you gave your absolute best to raising that kid, and that was a sacred sacrifice. So simply offer it up and let it be what it was. For many of us, we are seduced into thinking we have guarantees. That kid is going to do what that kid is going to do, and we don't get guarantees. And so we take the cost and the sacrifice, and we offer it up. God, take this sacrifice, makes it sacred. And so for many of us, we have these categories. We don't know what to do with our efforts in regards to that thing. Because the truth is, we were under the illusion that we would get a particular outcome, and then we don't get it, and we don't know what to do. And the Creator says, hand it over. What you did was a beautiful, beautiful thing. Control. I was trained as a pastor, and somewhere along the way, What got into my bones and into my bloodstream was this idea that my job was to take you and get you from this place to this place. And so you're here, and there's some ideal place, and my job is to somehow figure out how to get you there. I made this place up in my head, by the way. If I could just get them more aware, enlightened, whatever the word is. If I could just get them there, then that'd be beautiful. If I could just figure out they're here. I can remember literally having language like once Mars Hill, and Mars Hill, I don't know if Mars Hill, does Mars Hill exist? Because my awareness is the church is people. But nevertheless, this sort of faceless entity, if we could just get it from here to here, then we will have arrived. Oh, then I can relax. Then we can say, oh, thank you, God. And what had to happen to me over the years is God had to beat out of me my desire for control. Because we do that. We engage with this particular person and we have in our head where they're supposed to be. And we make up our own criteria, subjective to say the least, and then we evaluate them over whether or not they have reached this place we've decided for them. And what God had to do is just beat that out of me. No, preacher boy. No. You don't get guarantees, and you don't get outcomes. People are going to do what they're going to do. All you do is you just take the gift and you offer the gift. You give yourself 100% to it. You throw everything you have into it. And then, because it is a gift freely given, you simply celebrate the sacred act that gift was. And you trust me with the rest. And over time, it just had to be beaten out of me. Control is an illusion. Guarantees are a deception. All you have, preacher boy, is the gift. And you give it with joy. You give it with liberation. You throw yourself into it. And then you step back and you celebrate that the sacrifice makes it a sacred thing. Because you don't get to manipulate and control how it will be received or understood. That is the truth. When you begin to see the world sacramentally, when you begin to understand that relationship, that marriage, those kids, those business partners, those other students, you give yourself to them fully and freely, like a gift, freely given, freely received. And then you celebrate the sacred cost and sacrifice that it was, knowing that you did that, and that's what it is. And you don't need to control or have anxiety or worry. You give it and let it be what it is. To see the world sacramentally is to understand that the sacrifice makes it sacred. If I might have a rant for a few moments, there is a phrase that people sometimes use. It was a God thing. Now, this was taken from the Black Power movement. So right there, I'm a little, I don't know if you can just use that way. Nevertheless, it was a God thing is generally used when things go well. We got the results we wanted. The outcomes were what we had planned on. So it was a God thing. Well, what happens when you didn't get the results that you planned on? What happens when that kid makes that choice instead of that choice? Where was God then? Or was your sacrifice, was the cost to you, was your effort, was the blood and the sweat, that was all a God thing. You were swimming in the divine from the very beginning. The sacrifice makes it sacred. Does God only get acknowledged when things go the way that we expected? Or do we on the front end open ourselves up to the fact that this is going to cost And I'm going to pay for this. And this may even hurt at times, but this is the beautiful, right thing to do. And so I offer it up because the sacrifice makes it sacred. Jesus is dining with his disciples. And he's in Bethany in the home of Simon the leper. A woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste? They said. Do you find yourself asking about the divorce? Why this waste? About that business startup that didn't last? Why this waste? About a child. I spent hours of my life giving to this child's raising, and now perhaps you're caring for somebody, an elderly parent, and why all of these hours are spent taking care. It's all a sacred offering. And to think and live and move and breathe and have a sacramental understanding. I assume that David's mighty men were like, why this waste? And David says, oh, no. This wasn't a waste. This was a sacred act of worship. Jesus later simply says, what she did was beautiful. Beautiful. Do you have anything that you are trying to interpret and you can't because you're stuck in the same old categories? You're dragging behind this thing, wondering, I gave myself to them. I gave myself to that, and it blew up. And you stop, and you take those years, you take that money, you take that effort, and you pour it out, and you say, this is a sacred act of worship. So as we come and take communion, we acknowledge Jesus, a sacrifice so that we might have life, who integrates us, who puts us back together, who makes sense of things. Dear God, we bring before you our desire for control, our obsession with outcomes and results. We bring before you specific people, relationships, work that we have done, things that have started and didn't last, things that were a great idea that didn't catch, years spent serving something or somebody that we now find ourselves wondering, what was the point? Why this waste? We enter into a sacramental understanding of things, where the cost and the sacrifice make it a sacred act of worship. We find in this twist in this story with David, in this disturbing act, something very true, something that speaks deep into our bones. As we take this bread and dip it in this cup, as we reflect on Jesus, his body's broken and blood is poured out for the healing of the world, for the salvation, for the redemption, we trust this. We bring our doubts and our pain and our unresolved costs and sacrifices. We bring them to this table, to this cross. And we ask you to meet us there. In our failures, our sins, our mistakes, all the things that we have labeled a particular way. We ask you to meet us there and show us what has been present all along. In the strong, powerful, redeeming name of Jesus. Everybody said, amen.